Welcome to Caffeinated Mornings, a show built around the idea of more conversation and less presentation. We dive deeper into discussions that go beyond the surface of the work. A big thank you to our sponsors who make this show possible. Today's episode is brought to you by the award-winning, strategically driven, independent, full-service agency TDA Boulder. And we can't forget Buck Ross Productions and Coop Studios for helping us capture and share this show with you. A special thanks to The Coffee Ride for keeping us caffeinated, and to Realtor Michelle Sander at Porchlight Realty, CMCI Studio, Snappy Little Numbers for our theme music, and Pro Photo Rental for their continued support. In this episode, we join your favorite designer and host, Jay Farrakane, for a wide-ranging and fascinating conversation with designer, entrepreneur, and visionary Trent Bush. Trent takes us on a journey through Boulder's deep roots in outdoor innovation, sharing stories from his early days founding Twist with his brother to shaping the snow and outdoor industry at brands like Burton, Spyder, and Black Diamond. He reflects on decades of brand building, the evolution of performance apparel, and how culture, community, and creativity fuel his latest venture, Artelect Studio. So, settle in, top off your cup, and get ready for a ride through design, legacy, and innovation with the one and only Trent Bush. Let's go.
Thank you, Trent, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a little bit of background on you. We first really got to hang out one time. We were working on the Colorado Snow Sports Museum website. And I got to ride in a car with you for a little bit, and I realized how connected you were to not only the local snowboard culture, but to the snowboard industry as a whole. And much bigger than that. But it was on that trip I realized too, like, I had to add all these new like suffixes to the way I described you, and historian was one of them. Like, you've really like dedicated yourself to, you've had opportunities along your involvement in snowboarding to collect very meaningful pieces. You built the entire collection really and curated it at the museum. If you guys haven't checked out the Snow Sports Museum in Vail, Colorado, please do. It's really something. So now the way I've described you is designer, entrepreneur, innovator, brand builder, visionary, stander of sideways, and historian. So that's probably how I'll introduce you at cocktail parties now.
Perfect.
You're also a Boulder original. 5 generations of Boulder entrepreneurs in your own family. Trent, you continue your legacy as an innovator and outdoor industry leader with this career of 30 years? 35 now?
Maybe more.
From founding your own startups to roles with some of the biggest brands. Your latest project, founder and co-owner of Artelect Studio. Taking your kind of like foundational knowledge of like style and apparel technology, performance innovation, and really the passion for riding, and like, where has that taken you? So, and I think it's interesting too, that passion that has really driven the way that you've built your businesses and the things you've made. I think I've seen you put that same energy into community. Like, you really care, and you've kept this like kind of core community, whether it's big or small. Like, I think kind of we have these like diaspora of people around us, and yours is very interesting because some of them are in this room, but some of them were like, I've heard you talk about them in passing, and I'm like, dude, those are guys I only read about in magazines or dreamed about talking to. So anyway, well, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It is talked a lot about here on Caffeinated for some reason. I do think that skateboarding is something that you and I share as our common background, but it does come up a lot. And I think, why would skateboarding come up a lot in this talk series? I think skateboarding is one of those endeavors that allows you to like explore things in your own way and see things that you might not have. It was interesting in the lead up to this talk, you and I discussed your first love was skateboarding.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that shaped a lot of your view of the world, and way before making clothes or even snowboarding, for you, there was skateboarding. We were talking about like our high schools, and in those times, there was very viscerally different tribes,
Sure.
Metalheads, jocks, like, right? We saw them as things. And you mentioned that like skateboarding gave you this opportunity to move between tribes. Like, talk a little bit about how that became like a passport of advantage for you, and like how it shaped maybe like moving into making clothing and building brands.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, skateboarding was everything, for sure. I don't remember exactly when I kind of fell in love with it. I mean, my brother, who's here, Troy, a couple years older, he probably found it first.
Yeah, and you're like, I
he
gotta
always
do this
does
too.
everything first before me. But it was early. I mean, dating myself now, it was the 70s, right? And
It's okay. We're from the same
No,
generation.
no, I know. It's no problem. I'm actually happy that I got to live through that. But Boulder was actually a skateboarding almost mecca within, if you weren't East Coast, you weren't West Coast. Boulder was in the middle in more ways than one, especially
Well, and then
in
we had
skateboarding.
industries here. That
We
were,
did, yeah.
Like Kryptonics.
Kryptonics was here,
yeah.
so the biggest skate wheel brand in the world was out on Central Avenue. They had made wheels, I think, for mining conveyor belts.
No way. I always wondered why.
I think so. And somebody thought, oh, these would be great for skateboarding. So Kryptonics was here, boulder boards, wall boards. I think they were actually pressing decks for like Dogtown. A lot of different, I mean, there was just a skate culture. There was a High Roller was the skate park.
Yep.
That's
gone
long
though, right?
bulldozed.
Like,
Oh yeah, oh for sure. It was on Baseline and Foothills. And the Hester series, they only had that in California, and then they had it in Boulder.
Yeah.
So there was this really crazy skate culture that was here, and I was exposed to it pretty early on. Bought my first real deck. There was a skate shop down on Pearl Street right here, downstairs called Sidewalk Surf Shop.
Oh, okay.
And I bought a.
This is before Wave Rave.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is long before. This is 1977 or 8, and my mom took me down. We went to Grand Rapids toy store, which was still around, I think, and I bought wheels and trucks there because we couldn't afford a full setup.
Yeah.
And then went to Sidewalk Surf Shop and I bought a Z-Flex J Adams deck, which was, narrow.
Do you still have it?
Oh yeah.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
I know you
Yeah,
collect
no,
everything.
yeah,
You
of
keep it
course.
all.
Yeah, I keep it in my office. It's in a frame. Lugged it around for decades before I
awesome.
finally had a place for it. But yeah, no. So, skateboarding was our thing. And we'll talk about it a little bit the early days, but it was my thing that I could do different than my family. My family was really outdoorsy, and it was camping, hiking, fishing, whatever. And for me and Troy, skateboarding became the thing. And as soon as I discovered it, everything I wanted to do revolved around it.
It becomes pretty consuming.
Oh yeah,
for most.
all consuming.
Yeah.
And so my friends and I would go take the bus to Bob's Toys and Hobbies, which was the spot that sold skateboards, the other place in Boulder once Sidewalk Surf Shop was gone. And yeah, we'd go and the new Thrasher would be coming out every month. All of the things that went around it, like you're saying, you in Boulder in particular back then, there were very distinct different things. So there were the hippies, of course.
Yep.
There were the mods. There were the smokers. There were the jocks. There were the goths.
There was goths even then.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, totally. It was like the
Creepers and
very
shit,
beginning.
right?
Yeah,
Big
creepers,
shoes.
of course. Yeah, and so most people had to kind of choose one. And that's what I was telling you. If you were a skateboarder, you could kind of float.
Yeah. They gave you a passport.
They give you a passport because the kids that would want to fight you normally, you have a skateboard, so they're not going to fight
Yeah,
you.
totally.
And then the other kids, they just you could be weird enough,
Yeah.
and be yourself. But back to the point. I mean, I think that's where I discovered culture of my own, and it's where again going up and the new Thrasher's coming out, so taking the bus and going to Bob's Toys and Hobbies and not being able to buy one, but going through it cover to cover and getting that early sort of skate shop experience. I mean, that was everything.
Skate shops were like
Skate shops were
a clubhouse.
They were
you know?
complete clubhouse,
Yeah.
and everything we did revolved first around the skate shop and then around the music that was coming out, especially Thrasher, because it was
Yeah.
a
Yeah, they covered all the bands.
They
and
covered all
stuff.
the bands, and so you couldn't hear about something and go listen to it somewhere. You had to hear about it and go to Trade a Tape on the Hill or some other record shop and buy it.
We would do
Just
the
sight
thing where we
unseen,
looked at albums and we would try and pick out like what the guy's shirt was on the back, like of like
Yeah.
hand-drawn shirts, and then you could look for that album in the store.
You would look for it, yeah.
Yeah.
And so again, it was a totally different time, but that's the thing that shaped me the most by far. And that's how, kind of what led to the snowboard thing later.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have, there was skate culture. It went away when Kryptonics left and when the park was leveled and all that. And so, we
Then street probably started happening.
Then street started happening, yeah. And so we just had to, I mean, that was it and that was all. Yeah.
It's funny too because you as that is like a formative part. You grew up in a family. Being a true Boulder original, there aren't many people that you meet here. Actually, I know Stephanie's here. She's a Boulder original. There's a few of you. There aren't many, but you grew up in a family whose roots, you mentioned them, like super outdoor people, hikers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like it also gave you a format that they were making things themselves. And I do think that there's an interesting thing for parents or people who can influence young creatives, because once they see the availability of permission, maybe that's the way to describe it, that like, hey, there's no barrier up here. You don't have to ask for permission to go make a jacket or something like that. It was almost second nature for you guys to kind of start into thinking about making things in the way. You didn't have a lot of walls up around the way.
Zero walls. Yeah, my dad worked at an outdoor brand called Frostline, which was one of the early...
I found an old ad for that.
Yeah,
It was really awesome.
super early, innovative. Boulder has this legacy in the outdoor side of Holly Bar and Jerry and Frostline and all these first generation outdoor brands that became really pivotal in the outdoor space. And my dad was one of the earliest employees. He worked at NCAR opening day. They had a aluminum shop, like a fabrication shop, because they had to make everything on site.
Yeah.
And he and his friends were super into backpacking and camping and fishing and all that. They couldn't afford backpacks, so they actually made frames in the fabrication shop.
Like the old school ones.
The old school, yeah. The old, metal external frames, and bought fabric at the Holly Bar shop, made backpacks. And they were making tents. And so my dad actually made a tent, pitched it in his front yard on 700 Gillespie. And the guy, Dale Johnson, who started Frostline, drove by one day and saw it, stopped the car and wanted to know what was up with the tent.
It's my dad's real life social marketing, dude.
Real life, yeah. I mean, it was just happenstance. He just drove by and there was my dad. And he was, my dad was trying to kind of pitch him on the tent, literally like, oh, you want an outdoor brand? I make tents and backpacks, And Dale's like, oh, we got that covered, but what else do you do? And my dad's like, well, I'm a graphic designer. And, I don't know what they called it at that point. It wasn't a graphic designer. He was like a technical draftsman, I think, at NCAR.
Commercial draftsman or
Commercial
something.
draftsman, yeah. But he was really creative. And so long story short, the Frostline was a do-it-your-own kit company where you'd actually buy kits. Everybody had a sewing machine back then. My mom sewed all our clothes, unfortunately, or fortunately for me and Troy. And so, yeah, literally everything that we had was made by... my mom or somebody else, but that entire company was based around making things. And so, yeah, Troy and I were brought up in an environment where that's just what you did. And if you wanted to start a company, that's what Dale Johnson did, and you just did it.
Yeah.
And we were exposed to that. And back then, too, things had not offshored yet. So there were manufacturing facilities in Boulder, because Boulder was such an outdoor town. So you could actually, like where Lolita's is now, there was a sewing factory there.
Really?
Yeah, in the back. Yeah, and places like that. So you could just go and you could literally go and get things made. Yeah. And that's all I knew.
Well, it's an interesting time to think about too, right? Because like you would just dive in and start making stuff, and you didn't need some financial prediction of will this be successful or not. You just kind of started.
It was different, and everything was hyper local too.
Yeah.
And Boulder wasn't the expensive Boulder it is now.
Right.
There were a lot of things you could do that were, that you could just subsist by making a few things and selling them. Yeah. And so but Frostline was actually a really big brand. It was one of the biggest outdoor brands in the country at the time. They were mainly mail order.
Okay.
And they had some shops, but it was almost all mail order.
Yeah. Exactly. I love the days of like catalogs.
Yeah, it's catalogs. So my dad made all the catalogs and did all the instruction books and all that. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, exactly.
So you built a number of brands in your life. Number one, we got to talk about Twist a little bit, but also to building things like Analog with your brother and stuff like that. And I don't know if people even know this, but you're like instrumental in the creation of Hoppa. Like it was almost like you built another clubhouse.
Yeah.
And so many other things that you've like built or influenced. But I want to talk a little bit about Twist, and like building off of this idea of, hey, there wasn't pre-built structures or investors to like drive decision-making and things. You guys kind of just, hey, I want this in my life, so we're going to start to make this. It was interesting to think about that. Like nothing else like Twist existed, because most of the ski wear at that time was Euro influenced, I would say, right? Had too colorful. Didn't it fit into a skate lifestyle? Talk to me a little bit about like.
It's not skate lifestyle.
Yeah, it was
at all.
not. Talk to me a little bit about like building the snow brand that you wanted.
Yeah, so that came from obviously being super involved in snowboarding really, really early 80s. Yeah, Bob's Toys and Hobbies started selling snowboards. And so then a shop called Wave Rave opened down on Pearl Street. Before the one, there's still Wave Rave in Tahoe.
Oh, there is? Okay, yeah.
And in, or
in
Mammoth,
Olympic Valley
Mammoth,
now.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, oh, is it? Okay.
And LA. And so, yeah, it was the original Wave Rave shop. And so I think my brother got a job there in 84 or so, and I got a job there in 85. And it was one of the first snowboard shops in the U.S. By far. I mean, Edges maybe had just come out on snowboards.
Who's making
Hybex,
boards at this time?
Burton Sims, Barfoot,
Okay, so the big guys were there,
Avalanche, yeah, some of those guys. And so we were working there. So this is before Twist, but it leads to the Twist story. And we were selling, Burton and Sims and all these different big brands. But they were driven more from surf, even from skiing in a lot of ways.
Yep.
There was a lot of Euro stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so we were just really not into even the own products that we helped make at Wave Rave, because Wave Rave became a clothing brand too. So in high school, Troy and I and our friend Amani, that photo up there, which is in our second office above the sink up on the hill, we just wanted to do some things different. And we came from a skate background where everything else was like surfing on snow.
Yeah.
We're like, no, we want to skate on snow.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because like I said before, there were thriving skate communities in SoCal and in New York, but there was, the skate community, the community was here, but the products weren't. And so then when snowboarding came, it was like our chance to do what we wanted to do. And going back from being kids and not knowing you couldn't just start a brand, we not only did we not have to ask permission, our parents encouraged it.
Yeah.
Troy got the first fleece for a jacket that we made and cut it.
And you guys are literally
my mom
buying bolts
sewed
of
it.
fabric.
Yeah, we were buying bolts of fabric, but we actually started Twist off the roll ends of what was left from the Wave Rave gear. And we just basically remixed it because we were kids. I mean,
It's the
we
original
were at Boulder
Cotopaxi,
High.
dude.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And so we started, Troy made that first fleece, and it was just one of those stories of, you wear it around town, you wear it on the hill, because we were working at Wave Rave and people were just trying to buy it off our backs and were. And so that was just sort of the kernel that started that. But it was that we had a vision of snowboarding that was a direct outcome of skateboarding and skateboard mentality and like the entrepreneurial sort of mentality too, which was really at Wave Rave, which was super crazy. It was really thick on the entrepreneurial side. So Rick Alden, who started Skull Candy, Stance.
That's right.
He worked with him when I was 16, I think, 16 or 17. Brett Conrad, who owned Wave Rave, his brother's Chip Wilson from Lululemon.
Oh, yeah.
So there was, Chip was always here in town, and there was just that full entrepreneurial mindset that was even a step further than the one we had just from our parents and that whole thing. And so again, there was no asking for permission, and there was the ability to make stuff, and we did,
It was interesting because, like, if you talk about, like, what was the real differences of Twist for me as a guy who was snowboarding at this time and watching it come into shops and stuff like that, fits, color, like, it was all the stuff that I wanted in skateboarding, but we had, tighter pants, and it was just such a welcome thing. I think it's also really interesting to talk about with Twist that you kind of, like, by default, I would say built the playbook of what most brands do today in marketing. Like, you built a world around the brand.
No, 100%. It was
social. If there was no social then, but you guys made your own mags.
Yeah, we made mags.
Made your own videos. You were documenting everything, drawing it. Friends from your art community were making the art that you wanted to see, and you were doing like culture shit in relation to it. Talk a little bit about like what drove that. Maybe it's part of your historian background of just wanting to document that life. That this was
I wasn't a historian yet.
Maybe you were though.
Maybe it was interesting. It was we had a version of snowboarding in Boulder, and we had a version of snowboarding in Summit County, in particular in Colorado, that was totally different than what was happening in the magazines and on the coasts. And most of the snowboard media, the Trans World Snowboarding and Snowboard, those were
Just
all,
wasn't covering you guys,
well,
right?
they were based in SoCal.
Yeah.
And had no bearing on what we were doing here, and everything was changing. And there were a group of kids, like Boulder kids, that came out of the next generation of Chris Pappas and Dave Dowd and all these guys that were the Wave Rave team, like Tarquin Robbins and Adam Merriman, Quinn Sandvold. I mean, there's just this list of early innovative snowboarders who were part of our crew. Like you said, the art piece was huge. So Evan's here, Evan Hecox. Troy was going to Colorado State at the time and met Evan when they were probably 19 or 20. I don't even know. And so Evan came in to be part of the Twist crew and did all of our art, and really changed the way people look at snowboarding, really taking a much more forward approach. We did magazines, like we said. That was super fun. We did
And these weren't
videos.
just zines, though. I think they felt like legit.
They were
publications,
tabloid size. They were
Yeah.
giant. Yeah, it was super cool. And we just make them and throw them in a box with with our shipment to the local store.
Yeah.
We would ship them. We'd throw 25 in there and ship them. They didn't cost anything. We made videos. So Justin Hostenek, who later went on to
legendary.
create Absinthe Films, which is the world's biggest. He just launched a TV station.
No
Absinthe
way.
TV. Yeah.
Really?
But he was part of our crew, so we made a movie called Anthem. We made some Twist videos first. We made a movie called Anthem, but we made mixtapes.
Yeah,
Send
that's
those
right.
out.
Because
Yeah,
even like that.
we made those. Justin made calendars.
Huh.
I got him to put my birthday on the calendar that went out to everything. And so again,
Everyone
we were
sends
just,
you gifts?
Yeah, we were just making up our own world, and our world was so different. And again, there was no internet, so you couldn't see what was going on in different scenes. All we knew was ours.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ended up in Colorado because Colorado got so much coverage from the early worlds contests and things at Breckenridge.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, 1990, 1991, everybody convened, all the Midwest skate kids, everybody came together in Breckenridge. And we were that sort of prototype brand in the right place at the right time with the right motivation.
Was that the puffy paint Wave Rave pants?
No, that was after
Okay.
I made those. But this was Twist. I mean, this was us taking what we thought was from a design perspective and from a cultural perspective, and that's the bigger piece, and really trying to redefine snowboarding from sort of neon clown suit, big hair, sort of what was happening at the time to no, we're about skating on snow, and we were modifying snowboards, and we were modifying all the equipment. We were doing our own clothing. We were doing all of that.
Stances were so dumb at one point.
I think I had a 25 straight across on a 170 before with no high backs.
Yeah.
Before I cut it down, and so everything changed. But anyway,
That's funny.
Aggression Snowboards was here in Boulder. That was a big driver with Tarquin. Tarquin Robbins is just such a legend in as far as being the front end of all that stuff.
As being a West Coast dude at that time, it was really impactful of watching what was coming out of here. And me skateboarding, it reminded me a lot of when I would ride with Colorado guys. It reminded me of skating with East Coast dudes.
Yeah,
there was just a little bit of more grit.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure.
In the Colorado,
it was super gritty.
Yeah.
I mean, it was how many times in a day could you eat Taco Bell? Back then because it was cheap.
Yeah, totally.
40 cent tacos. That's what we did. It was totally gritty. It was totally real, and it came from a place of again just really trying to create our own little world. And doing it based on just the things we knew and the things we cared about.
Well, I think that's the notion of
Yeah.
True DIY scene building really does exist in that kind of world. And if it's just cool to me that you guys just documented it in a way of hey, this is the material we need around us, so we're gonna make it ourselves. The last time we chatted, you and I came up with the notion of and this gets talked about too a lot here, is that design has, in its purest form, is purely objective. And I think if I was coming out of design school 100 years ago, I would have said, yeah, that's true. I don't have any input on the things I'm making for my clients. And now I realize that's kind of bullshit, that there is a lot of expression or personal experiences really do equate into it. So every designer has their own experiences, fortunes, misfortunes, all that stuff shapes you, all the travel you do. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. But it really is only, objectivity is only part of a design thing. Hey, I have to design for these other people. But at some point you are kind of designing for yourself. but there's a responsibility in designers bringing their experiences and opinions to their work, and to that fact that like you've traveled so much with all the brands you've worked on, and it's even shaped things like, hey, let's make Hoppa because we miss this thing we experienced in Japan. Like, talk a little bit about the value of experiences in the things that you've built, from travel to music to like, how's it, I think it's so important for designers to realize that this is almost as much a skill to develop as learning layout.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, especially in the recent times, AI, all the things that are happening
Google,
right
Google,
now.
people think they have experienced everything because like I found it all there.
Because they can find it on Google. Yeah. No, I mean, again, I think from my perspective, it's funny because I never actually really call myself a designer that often, because I'm more of an interpreter of experience. And it just becomes like an outcome of things that I
have
see
another
or I
thing
learn.
to add in my description of you.
Not designer?
Yeah, interpreter of experiences.
Interpreter of experience. But I think that is the big difference, and that is where all of these different things came from and went to. You know, we didn't, when we started Twist, just to go back to that real quick, we didn't have brands that we could look at that were, you know, Volcom didn't exist, DC didn't exist. All these brands that became big snowboarding sort of things existed. The things that did exist we didn't like. And so we took our culture and the things we knew and we funneled them into something totally new, totally different, and built our own, you know, little world. And so that's what I've, you know, guilty as charged, that's what I've always done. And, you know, a lot of it, and it's not, yeah, of course you have to have an outcome in mind. And sometimes you are hired to do a job with a specific, you know, brief
outcome,
or whatever.
Yeah,
that you have to kind of accomplish. But I don't think it's selfish anymore to try to inject some of yourself into that. In fact, I think it's probably more important as we move forward that you take those experiences, and that will be the difference between, you know, coming up with something that actually has a little bit of soul to it and something that is just something.
Well, and I think that's where the design objectivity thing gets a little wonky, is you can check the box and sure, it might answer the brief, but is it engaging or is it authentic? And I think that's where experiences start to like super drive that. And kind of the more I've looked at your past projects and the more we've gotten to chat, it's kind of funny now. I think I can almost like look back, Twist, Analog, all the things down. I can almost see each one as like a capsule of where you were at those periods too.
Yeah,
and it was just kind of, again, it challenges this idea of objectivity. You were doing design and making and building brands and all this kind of stuff. And now you're like, you know, well, I guess first I should ask, is that true? Is my like, my unpacking of like, we were in your office the other day and I was like looking at like stuff around Twist and then stuff around Analog. And I was like, oh, you could see what was kind of like influences, for me at least. Yeah. I could hear music, even though there wasn't any being played, but I could see what was probably in your mind at that time. Is that true? Is like, do you feel like they were like...
and that's the part about being seasoned.
Yeah.
Getting old. That you actually can look back and it's actually almost a diary in so many ways, because that's totally true. Because again, if you're trying to be true to yourself and your ideals, then the work reflects that. That's the outcome of the inputs, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, if you look back at the Twist stuff, of course, you know, and it's, you know, you'll have Twist, you'll have a logo or an unpublished ad or something like that. And then I've got some chocolate skateboards that, you know, Evan went straight from Twist to,
but you see that
redefining chocolate, you know, and
yeah,
you see the through line, you know, and then that goes into the work we did at Burton and starting Analog and all of that. Yeah, no, totally. It's all of a time. Sometimes funny, sometimes not, but it's always built on experience. You know, you mentioned Hoppa, and so that was something that.
And this is so delta'd out, like food.
Yeah, well,
you know?
But it's experience.
Yeah,
you know, like the best restaurants are an experience, right? And it's all the same. It's all culture.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were spending tons of time. Twist got really big. We blew it up in Japan in particular. So we were going to Japan a couple times a year, and there was so much at that time in the 90s. Japan, and again, internet really didn't exist, so you had to be there to see it. You know, otherwise you just see a picture of Mount Fuji, right? That was Japan for most people. But for us, we were at a forefront of, you know, the Harajuku, streetwear revolution, all these things that were going on, we were not only watching it, we were part of it. And we were inside. And so when our friend who we had a snowboard shop on Pearl, and that ended up closing when we kind of lost twist. And so Lori, who was the manager of the shop, who I worked with at Wave Rave, and again, these are the through lines, opened Hoppa. They were opening Hoppa, and this is 1998, I think. And so she came to Troy and I, because we had time off because we were working for Burton. We had summer time off, and just said, hey, I'm closing the shop. I want to open a sushi place. And do you guys want to help design it and hopefully create the vibe, whatever. And so at the end of the day, we ended up creating the entire, pretty much everything from the design sort of ethos.
I mean, you were telling me about specking out tables and
everything was custom. And again, this was 1999 when that thing opened, the original
But
Hop on Pearl Street.
I think this is the interesting thing where you kind of like exit the world of small D design, meaning like aesthetics, layouts, that kind of stuff, and you get into big D design. What was the problem we were solving? Yeah. And I think that you touched on a point that I try and relay here at Studio a lot, is whether you're laying out an app to log into a banking account or something like that, it's no different than the line at Chipotle is usually the comparison I use, because it's like all an experience, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that is missed. And to me, it's fascinating that you said that, because like I do believe good designers, problem solvers, whatever you want to call them. I know you're shy about that word, but shit, you're a designer. But it's interesting to say that you went from clothing to the food thing, and there wasn't this like, oh, we've never played in this industry, so like, should we even be doing this? There wasn't that. Probably was never a question.
No, because we looked at it again as a
experience,
and as a branding. How do you take something that, especially in Boulder at that time, it was fern bars and like oak, brass, and glass.
Yeah, brass and glass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like 70s style.
Cheers.
I mean, like Cheers kind of, but even Hoppa, the original one on Pearl, is the New York Deli from Mork and Mindy.
That's right.
Yeah, and so Boulder didn't. It was a totally different thing, and there was nothing that reflected our travels and our experiences and all that. There was nothing like that here, and so we just wanted to again create our own little world, like we do, and that was an interesting one for me, because I'd never designed a logo before. I wasn't a graphic designer at all. I mean, the way we sort of split it up in the work we had done up to that point was, Troy was more graphics and art driven, and I was more apparel design, and we crossed over. I didn't know how to design a logo. I just knew
you did. It's not that you didn't. It's probably you hadn't yet.
I hadn't.
Yeah,
but I mean, I didn't know how to make a typeface. I didn't know anything, and so it was brought Evan in to do the robot. It was just this idea of what my experiences were and what our experiences were, and how could we actually, again, this is like right when the internet was starting. How can you bring an experience that we've had and actually share that with people here who maybe aren't exposed to that, especially younger people who have no possibility of traveling anywhere. And again, at the end of the day, it's a restaurant, but restaurants are not that hard. It's 4 walls, a ceiling, and furniture, right. And then it's step and repeat. So you just choose the right things, and then you repeat them a lot of times, and then and then it works out.
It's like a staple here, though. Now it's
I think it's one of the biggest restaurants, grossing restaurants in Colorado.
It's crazy.
But again, it wasn't that foreign, because we were eating in a lot of sushi restaurants in Tokyo. And again, what we were really trying to do was capture the feeling of being there more than literal translation.
Right. Which I think to me is again, that gets out of objectivity and it comes more into expression, because communicating a vibe versus an actual depiction. The actual depiction's pretty easy, actually, right? Yeah. But feeling what it really feels like, that's the hard part. Yeah. On building on that like, what's it feel like? Artelect, I want to bring us to today, what you're currently working on. Artelect, to me, feels very like personal. And that's what kind of drove this discussion that we were having about objectivity and how much of experience of your own input comes into the work you do. Looking at Artelect and what you do there now, do you think design means something to you now that it might not have meant 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, so Artelect is basically a technical performance outdoor brand, but doing it in a sort of new school way.
Yeah.
It's Twist 30 years on. in my mind. So no, it's a complete through line. Everything leads to that. I got to a point in the snowboard market, and Twist was just the first brand we started, and Analog was just the second brand, but there were more after that.
There's been a bunch.
Yeah, no, a bunch, and that does get old. And if you're in one vein, for me, snowboarding doesn't get old, skateboarding doesn't get old, but doing the same thing over and over, especially for at that point, sort of this youth lifestyle component, because it had become a real business, and it wasn't that challenging anymore. And through the process, I had really gotten into kind of human performance and what I could do instead of just a lot of apparel design is just aesthetic design.
Yeah.
And for me, through all the career moves and all the things that I've had to do over the years, it was more about actually letting people go out and do things in a deeper way, longer, more comfortable, safer, whatever it was. Whatever the metric was,
experiences.
Exactly. And I did a lot of them, I got super into, the pow surfing, that, splitboarding, like all the different aspects of snowboarding. It was full circle back to the old days when we could only hike because you couldn't ride chairlifts, and the needs for keeping
sweat management.
Moisture management, thermoregulation, the big words of that. That was interesting. And it was a possibility to sort of, after kind of the pure snowboard years, I became a VP of global product at Mountain Hardwear. And then I worked at Black Diamond and rebuilt their apparel program. And Artelect was a chance to do all the things I wanted to do at different brands, but I could never do myself. And it was thinking really dimensionally with sort of a problem-solving need, more so than kind of a making money need.
Yeah.
And so it was a different way to kind of throw out the typical rules of the outdoor industry, especially at that time, 5 years ago, when Gore-Tex ruled and everything. And it was just a chance to really redefine it and look in dimensions of how do things fit together, how do they function together, how could I innovate, how could I bring new technologies, how could I be more responsible in the products we're making and all that kind of thing. So it was just kind of this vision. And Artelect it's really funny because the name is just a mashup of artificial intellect. So it's AI, but it was before, when I came up with the name, it was 10 years ago, long before AI.
Right.
But the thought was, could I actually create something that had built-in intelligence? So that was the whole drive. It's just like, could you put it on? And there are no wires or batteries, but could you actually increase human performance through just the stuff you wear? So
it was interesting because in that you were talking about like working in all these places, Black Diamond, all those things, and there's industry standards that usually kind of keep you locked in to stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You told me a really great story about, I'm going to call it doing the right thing. And I think this is a challenge, again, designers face themselves. Hey, the brief said this, but what the client really needs after unpacking all and doing all the things that designers should do is they really need this. So that weird wall of like, how do I show them and not be disrespectful or not have them feel like I'm not listening to them? And I'm a little bit of a segue. We're going to talk about music comes up as a thread in this. And I was telling you I went to a show this week. So I'm going to read this one because you and I left lunch the other day because I was talking about going to see this band. And we're like, yeah, what is even hardcore today? Well, I got the answer that night, which I think is so connected to brand building and things like that. And the lead singer of this band, I am going to read it, said the definition of hardcore to him, because he actually like got up and was thankful to people. He said, a scene where finding your people, finding yourself and going hard as fuck with the things you believe in and the convictions that you have in mind, whatever that may be, is hardcore. And I think you could switch that out for working on the shit you believe in. And I think designers have this opportunity. We get hired to do things and they're saying, hey, we asked for this specifically. And this really dovetailed in because you told me this story that I love hearing, these like nugget backstories of business moments, right? And you were talking about, you had been talking to writers and stuff like that about what they wished they were wearing and that kind of thing. And you knew what the industry wanted and what the upper-ups, CEOs or whatever you call the more decision-maker kind of guys. And they're like, we should do this thing, which was definitely not in your mindset. So at some point you had been working in the background and you pulled this thing out that you knew was the right thing. But had you taken the more like public steps of pulling the CEOs through it or whoever the decision makers were and saying, this is what we're really thinking about doing, you probably would have got shut down.
Yeah.
Way before it ever happened.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about I know Artelect gives you that permission, it seems like now, to do that. Yeah. But talk about a little bit about, well, number one, you can build on that story if you want, because I think it's
that was the analog story, I think. Yeah. So after Twist, when we lost that, I was on the board of directors of the Ski Industries of America, of SIA, with Jake Burton. And I'd known all those guys for a long time because snowboarding was really, really small back in the day. And so when we lost, basically when Twist blew up, Troy and Jake called and said, hey, do you want to come talk about working at Burton? So we flew to the East Coast. 2 weeks later, we were kind of the creative managers and head of Burton Soft Goods, right? But when we got in there, their version of snowboarding was, it was legit, of course, but it was their version of it.
Right.
And the things that we were doing here in Colorado in particular, and the New School movement and all these things, where Twist ended, we wanted to pick that up. And we were always working with the Burton team hand in hand. And there was a subset, the younger kids. There was Jeffy Anderson, Jason Brown, Chris Brown, just a whole subset of riders. We were working with Craig Kelly on the AK stuff. We were working with Terrier on Universe. There are all these different pieces and parts. But Burton had all these rules and all these different line segments. And the big problem was all of the cool stuff was in the segment of the cheapest stuff. And all of the technical stuff was the most expensive stuff. And there was...
But it didn't have a style or...
No, and they had their style. Each sort of bucket had a style kind of its own with riders that backed it. But there was nothing, again, going back to the idea of being a skater and running the gamut. So we came up with this idea that we needed something that was just a no rules category. And at the same time, Burton was really going broader market and going to big box stores.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have anything to really hold on to the specialty. And so they didn't have a solution. And Troy and I are just well, we do. And so we kind of pitched this idea for a brand segment that wouldn't have any rules. We could make a $700 Gore-Tex jacket for kids that just hit rails, whatever it was. But again, just no rules at all. And so that's where we cooked up this idea for analog, and it was not received well from the sales people making decisions and the marketing people, because it just would convolute, right? And so we ended up in the background making product, came up with the name, going through the dictionary. I looked at every word and saw analog. I'm that's a good one. Because again, pre-internet, right?
This is naming 101.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we went back, kind of pitched it. We got shut down the first year. They're okay, well, you can make a couple jackets in this BioLite line. But in the background, we were making snorkel jackets with fake fur and all kinds of stuff.
And then when the riders would see it, the people who were actually going to consume it,
they loved it. Yeah, they loved it. But nobody else. Everybody's what is this? This isn't a snowboard jacket, whatever. And so we went to a round table, which is kind of where all the riders get together with Jake in his barn and this whole thing, and talk about design ideas and directions. And Troy pulled the jacket out, and Jeffy Anderson jumped up literally on the coffee table. He's finally, this is what I want, And what Jake was really good at was listening to the riders, maybe not knowing so much that Troy and I were actually really riders too. And we were young. We were still in our 20s, and it was but it was confirmation, because what we did was what really lit up the younger part of the crew. And so that's how analog came to be. But again, it wasn't, if you just look at it from a business case perspective, from a spreadsheet perspective, it made no sense. Why would you want to start a new brand segment? Why would you have to support it with marketing? Why would you have to support it with distribution? Why would you have to do any of this stuff?
It's understandable.
Because Burton was it's $1 billion biggest snowboard company in the world. They were owning everything. But from our perspective, they weren't, because they weren't owning the kind of heart share. They had the wallet of the vast majority of the global market, but they weren't on a path that was maybe driving from what snowboarding always has been, which is innovation through riders, right? So we created that brand segment, and it became wildly popular.
Was that a brand ideal then, or innovation through riders? Because
Yeah.
as a brief, that's a pretty like a defendable brief that you could take back when someone's challenging you on something. You're like, this is what they want.
But we
you
weren't
know?
really briefing so much as we were showing. And again, to your point earlier, I mean, we don't. Maybe that's probably kept me back in my career in certain ways of not necessarily asking for permission and
Right.
also trying to always have some integrity in what I do. You can't always.
Well, that's the
Sometimes you have to take the
definition of
paycheck,
hardcore. That's
but,
why I say.
But most of the time, and that's what I've tried to do my entire life, is really just take the things I believe in, take the things I've seen, and again filter those differently to an outcome of some sort. You know, sometimes it's just for the person who's going to be wearing it, which Artelect has been kind of that.
Yeah.
We're not that well known. We're not that big, but you know, it's interesting and it's exciting, and we've changed a lot of things through it. But again, it's again, like you said, it's an outcome of the things that I've learned and bringing a lot of those, not only ideas, but people along as much as I could as well.
I've always thought that's cool that you keep your crew has like moved with you through all these phases. It's funny when I check in with you, you're like, just talk to Evan. Your brother's a big part of it. It's really cool to me.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move into our lightning round
Uh-oh.
here. So you ready for this? Because
Yeah.
it's hard hitting, dude. So a few quick fire choices, and it's usually like a choicey kind of thing, but that doesn't always mean it's a choice. So Colorado or Tokyo?
Oh, I mean, I live in Colorado, so obviously Colorado. I mean, I love Tokyo.
Yeah.
I'd love to live there for a little bit sometime, but there are too many rules.
Gore-Tex or wool?
Oh, wool, are you kidding?
Really? Nice. Big methods or misty flips?
Oh, big methods.
Yeah,
all day
good.
long.
Who has the best method in your mind?
Oh, you know, nobody will have seen these probably, but Tarquin Robbins.
Really? I love it when there's
It's
like,
burned in my mind, Eldora, but the old lift line, when there's just like, you know, super narrow trees, one lift going up, cannonball, and that was the jump. There was one jump at Eldora, and
I do
hit
think
it.
that
And he
it's
just
cool.
had this crazy, melancholy, methody, shifty. It was crazy.
we just need more style coming back.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
pure style.
Well, that's good. Building, leading, or making?
Oh, I mean, making. I think because it leads to what were the questions? What were the
Building,
choices?
leading, or making?
Yeah, I mean, if you build right, then you're leading, right? Or making. It's all kind of part and parcel. You know, I don't think
If you had to order
leading
it-
for me is not a thing.
If you had to order them in terms of preference,
I mean, I like making for sure.
to me, it's the funnest part.
Yeah, it's the fun part. You know, building can be a real pain, and it can be it's
a lot of labor.
It's a roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about building in a bigger
Yeah.
term of building
Like a
brands.
brand,
And yeah,
yeah.
oh, totally. It's the worst
Yeah, and because there's
in a lot of
sometimes-
ways, and sometimes the best, but typically not.
Well, and it's hard to see where you're at in it sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's hard. Yeah, I mean, because you, and especially these days,
Yeah.
because nothing is in your favor in so many ways, it feels like. But the only thing you have is the ability to keep making the things you believe in and hope that, you know, not that the world catches up to that vision, but that vision is necessary and needed, and that validation is helpful. But you don't always get it. Takes a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something I'm in the struggle with right now. Finished or in progress?
Oh,
Where do you live? Which one do you prefer?
I mean, I like in progress, but I don't really finish a lot of things. I mean, I'll hand them off, but in my mind, they're not necessarily finished. I mean, they're projects like they come back,
Yeah.
or you'll see them again. But I really like I like the work, and that's probably my, you know, Zen or meditation or whatever the word is. You can get lost in the work, and it's surprising sometimes.
I think sometimes it's like the momentum of work in its own right, that just repetition and stuff sometimes is like, it's part of like just a practice. It's almost like riding bikes or skateboarding or something.
No, it's
like
exactly. I
that.
mean, if you do it enough, and I always say it's like if you can play the Mac like an instrument.
Yeah.
You know, like Adobe Illustrator. If you get to the point where you're not thinking,
Yeah.
and you're not looking for a command, and it's all just, it's like playing a guitar. It's
Yeah.
just key commands, and then you're able to really be in that sort of flow state the flow state a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that's when the best work typically comes out. When I'm definitely not thinking about it and I'm just doing it.
Yeah, me too. Soy sauce. Fish side down, rice side down.
Oh, I mean,
There is a prescribed.
there's a prescribed, gently dip the side of the fish in soy sauce. Yeah, no, for sure.
You're a rule follower like that?
No.
Because I'm rice side down all the time.
The only rule is not leaving the sticks in the rice. No, I go with whatever.
Okay.
Whatever,
No.
whatever feels best. At
No
the time.
standard.
No standard. No.
And the last one, it's a hard-hitting question. Regular or goofy?
Oh, regular.
Yeah.
All day long.
Nope, goofy every day.
Yeah, my brother's goofy and Mongo.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and
That's
Mongo. So, yeah, he pushes Mongo.
All right. I think one of your superpowers, and this is really rare in design, and all the conversations we've had and stuff. I think all the things you're building, all the things you're still building, the things you've built, you seem to have very little ego around what you've done and stuff. I mean, you look at me and like tattoos are compensating for a lot of stuff. But like, it's interesting that like you just present yourself as authentically as you really are, and you don't have to carry along your resume with you. Is there any way like you hope people kind of remember not only the work you've done or the brands you've built, but the way that you've showed up to do the work?
Yeah,
the way you hope to be remembered.
I mean, my mind is you're only as good as the work you're doing now, and it's fun to look back at some of the stuff I did as a kid or whatever, and those are experiences that lead to something. But you're only as good. Literally, I mean, if I was just talking about Twist is more than I've done in a long time, right? And it's like, so if I had gotten caught back then, I wouldn't be the same person. So I really like staying as to the moment as I possibly can. I don't know if that answers it, but it's
it does.
Yeah, that's what I like for sure. And I guess that, the legacy piece, I that's what would I like to be remembered for, and that's the thing, like where we met, right? Besides coming to these things for forever,
for a long time,
but it was really through the work I do with the Snow Sports Museum and the snowboard collecting piece. Because when I was working at Wave Rave, there were all these legendary snowboarders on the Wave Rave team. Tim Wendell, Kevin Delaney, Dave Dowd, Chris Pappas, George Pappas. I mean, just so many legends. There was a time, and we were partially to blame for this, where old school snowboarding and what was happening got totally eclipsed by this sort of new school movement that we were driving and leading in a lot of ways. And it was just kind of like when skateboarding went from vert skating to street.
Yeah.
And all of the guys that were the
guys
heroes, literally overnight, they got forgotten. And not only forgotten, but kind of clowned, right? And so that piece, so the legacy piece for me, that's when I really decided to, because I was living through this and these were all my heroes and the people that got me into snowboarding, that I couldn't let them be forgotten. And it went down to, Tom Sims, and now Jake's gone, and all these people who literally started something from nothing and fought harder than anything to make it real,
viable industry.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And all the stories in between and what it really took. And so that's where I started the museum project. And it took me like 15 or 20 years to get that to happen. But I was trying to, again, preserve that. And so for me, legacy isn't so much the things I make. It's in, I mean, one of the things I make was the museum, right? And that everything goes around that. But for me, that's more important, that my legacy is actually connected to celebrating sort of and capturing and making sure that people don't forget about certain things. That in the end of the world, it's snowboarding. It's not that big of a deal. But for me, it was, I couldn't do it for skateboarding, but I could do it for snowboarding. So I did. Yeah.
I think it shows that you have like a respect and reverence, even though you kind of changed the game. But where you came from is so important.
Yeah.
Too.
No, 100%.
I think that's really rad.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited that we finally made this happen.
Yeah,
dude.
no,
Like
thank you.
illnesses and all in between.
Illnesses
But thank you
and
for
all. Yeah.
being here. Thank you guys all for being here.
Yeah, thanks.